Well, welcome back to the Anti-War Room. I'm Tom Andrews from Win Without War, and once again, Darcy Scott Martin from True Majority on my right, and John Isaacs from Council for Livable World on my left. And we're here to take the temperature of the Congress, what's happening with respect to Iraq, and what's going to happen next week. We have one final week to go in our congressional session before summer recess. And this week, very interesting, we had General Petraeus coming out with a report indicating that we're going to have extended large-scale military operations in Iraq through 2009, so kind of a preview of what he's going to be saying on September the 15th. We had the president traveling to South Carolina, giving a speech about how Iraq truly is the central war on terror, because Al-Qaeda is in Iraq. Al-Qaeda in Iraq is Al-Qaeda. And then you have the House passing for the sixth time a piece of legislation that says we should have no permanent bases in Iraq, 399 to 24. What do we make of these developments in the House and outside of Washington this week, John?
I would say the issue and debate on when and how to get out of Iraq is definitely still very much in turmoil, uncertainty. Congress is more and more inclined to push to get troops out. At least the Democrats are. Republicans still are not ready to vote for that. Yesterday, however, on the No Permanent Basis Amendment bill, almost all Republicans voted for that. But next week we'll have some more tests again. The House of Representatives takes up the Defense Appropriations Bill, and we expect votes on withdrawal from Iraq, on closing the Guantanamo Bay Detainee Center, as well as a requirement that troops, before they get sent back to Iraq and Afghanistan, have more time at home and more time to rest and retrain. This
is what Senator Webb tried to get passed over in the Senate. Well, Darcy, what is going on? What is the strategy from Democrats over in the House? Why, for example, let's start with what happened this week. Why, for the sixth time, do we pass a bill that says that there'll be no permanent bases in Iraq?
Well, not to reiterate what we discussed last week when we were visiting, but or the week before, it is the case that as people prepare for their time at home, they want to position themselves in the best possible light to go back to their constituents and say, I've been doing everything I can on Iraq. I've been voting in a way that I think that you would agree with. Certainly on the Democratic side, there's fodder that is preparing for that break. There's also a preparation for September being kind of a firestorm on these issues. Not only will Petraeus have his report, but GAO will also be running their own September report that talks about the benchmarks that were assigned in Iraq and whether they're being met or not. So it's a little bit of, truth-telling to the larger dramatic theater that will go on with the general's report. With all of that in mind, September will be time for people to begin campaigning for their next election cycle, and it's vitally important that they get as many kind of bites at the apple to talk about what they intend to do about Iraq, and they're taking a lot of time here in July. I was surprised that there was so much oxygen available for this, but it's partly because the Senate, in fact, has pulled all their discussion of Iraq with their defense bill. And so all the things that people were looking forward to, like a Guantanamo or a habeas corpus or all those kinds of issues, are gone on the Senate side. And the House is going to get to take all the publicity for that and make waves.
That's political oxygen that Darcy is referring to. So you have, on the one hand, you have people wanting to position themselves before they go home, being able to make a statement through their votes on Iraq. You've got the quote-unquote charges of a do-nothing Congress that we have sensitivity to among congressional leaders. They want to see something passed, some progress made. But then you have this idea that, well, look, maybe we shouldn't be rushing into passing these bills like the 399 to 24 bill on permanent basis, because we're giving those who are opposed to making real change in Iraq, giving them an out. They can go home to their constituency and they say, well, I may be against voting for getting out of Iraq, but I don't believe in permanent bases, and so I'm really kind of with you, at least, because I'm casting those votes. Next week, we've got these votes. We've got Chairman Murtha from the Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense proposing, allegedly, that that the Congress should order the initiation of the withdrawal by a date certain, but no end date, no fixed date at the end. We've got Congressman Abercrombie from Hawaii basically reflecting what Senator Lugar and Senator Warner has proposed that that the Congress require that there be a plan for the withdrawal of troops that must be established and provided to the Congress by October. And the other ones that, John, that you mentioned, what can we expect next week from the activist community? How these are coming pretty fast and furious. What should we be watching for? And what is the message to people out there who want to see some progress made before the break? John?
The activists are going to be split on the votes next week. The Congressman Murtha's proposal, again, to have a deadline to begin withdrawal but not one to end withdrawal, is something beyond which is too weak for most activists who want a definite end date to get all U.S. troops out. What Congressman Murtha is trying to do, however, is appeal to Republicans who say they're against the war, they don't like it, but they're not willing to vote against it. This is his attempt to see if he can build a bipartisan coalition. I think his argument is ultimately the war doesn't stop until Republicans go down to the White House and tell Bush he's got to stop the war. Whether Murtha's effort is successful, I don't know, and a lot of the Democratic liberals and the activists will probably either stay neutral or oppose the bill.
So many Democrats, many progressives are going to vote against the bill because it doesn't have a date certain. But the idea is, from Congressman Murtha, we can at least pull up some Republicans, and then from the point of view of the issue itself, the theory is, well, if you start the withdrawal, inevitably we're going to find an end point. But the point is, let's get it started, and then we can work on the next step, which is finding an end point.
When it actually can't become, I mean, the image he has of that bill, if it also had all the liberals on it, he wouldn't get those Republicans that he's trying to get. The whole point is it needs to have some flavor to it that's unappealing to the kind of folks he doesn't want supporting it and doesn't want voting for it, so that he can have those blue dogs and have enough cutaway Republicans. I'm not saying it's the right strategy, but it's the only one you can use to move to the center on that.
And it seems that several of these bills have that characteristic. Mm-hmm. You've got the bill, yesterday, obviously, no permanent basis for the sixth time, picks up 399 votes. You've got Congressman Abercrombie's bill, which has Republican co-sponsors. So it seems like there's a pattern here in which the leadership of the Congress seems to be wanting to bring in these Republicans, start peeling them off from the president, while demonstrating that the Congress can actually do something and make some progress. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this turns out. And the major point is to talk to members of Congress about taking action that ultimately is going to get us out of there. And we're going to watch these developments very, very closely. Next week is the last week for Congress to be here. We're going to be here to talk about what happens next week in some detail, and then we're going to talk more in detail about what's going to happen in August. A lot of activity all across the country as members go home and hopefully face the music and a good lot of heat from those who have been on the other side of this issue. Thanks very much for joining us. Darcy, thank you. Thank you, John. And thank you. And we'll see you right back here next week in the Anti-War Room.